Hey, MLS listing subscribers and the real estate world in general. Thanks for tuning into another podcast here with us. And we're thrilled today because today we've got the CEO of the California Association of Realtors, John Sebree, with us. John, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, David. It's so good to be with you.
Thanks. Like I said, we're thrilled. Really want to say thanks for coming on, taking the time. And I should point out, we saw you at the installation dinners for the associations. I saw you there at San Mateo and Monterey, and just wanted to say thanks as well because I know you've been there for the last couple of years. You started only just in 2022. We'll get into your bio in a second.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Since February 1st of 2022, I felt
22.
like I wanted to get to as many of those installations and local association events as I could.
I think that's fantastic. It really it's noticeable. I know the realtors love to see you there. We'd love to see you there, and I think it really reinforces that family culture. And so kudos to you on that.
Thank you.
Now, so why don't you go ahead and tell us, John? Because I know you actually were born and raised in Kentucky, right? So
Yes.
you're on the opposite side of the coast here. Why don't you tell
Yeah. If
us what
there are
kind of got
any
you here?
Kentucky fans out there, I was raised in Kentucky, born, raised, went to undergrad in Kentucky. And then as soon as I graduated from college, my dream was to move to Washington, D.C. And I was the student body president. I talked to several members of Congress from the Kentucky delegation and ended up getting a job in D.C. working for the U.S. House of Representatives. And that's important because 2 years there during the savings and loan crisis, the realtors, the National Association of Realtors, were lobbying us during that time because I was on the House Banking Committee staff, and that's what my job was: real estate, banking, savings and loans, and the connection of the three. And so the National Association of Realtors offered me a job. I'd only been on the Hill 2 years, and I was pretty excited. I had thought I would always move home to Kentucky, but
Sure.
instead I stayed in DC and ended up being with the National Association of Realtors for 13 years as a lobbyist in the DC office. And then Florida Realtors hired me away to run their lobbying operation in Tallahassee. And then I was there 11 years. And then Missouri Realtors hired me away to be their CEO. So that was my first switch over from being a lobbyist for realtors to being a CEO of a state association. I did that 7.5 years. And then my name was in the hat for the California job. And I think it was all of those experiences combined, the advocacy experience for realtors for 24 years, plus being a CEO of a state association. I ended up getting the job here in California. So here I sit 2 months,
Here you are.
2 years and 1 month later in the job of CEO of CAR.
And John, that's an impressive resume, first off. But one of the first things that stood out to me was your experience as the GAD of NAR for 13 years, was it?
Yeah, so in government affairs, we had a group of, there were about seven of us lobbyists who divided the country. So I had 8 states where I worked the US Senate, the US House for those 8 states, and on all issues. We were all generalists. So it was really a wonderful time for me to get to know every issue. Maybe not be an expert on every issue, but know enough to talk to members of Congress and their staff. So yeah.
Yeah, wearing all those hats. Yeah, and we did. We last year to end the year, we did a podcast with all our government affairs directors for each of our core counties, and we did. We're talking about not only what the hot kind of educating realtors on what the issues were, but also trying to get them engaged. Like you do make a difference, right? Especially coming into an election year, and we've got legislative day in May. So it was really well received, and so it's kind of a perfect pivot here going in. And one of the things, that no matter what county we were talking to, obviously is we're in California, affordable housing, the lack of inventory, right? It was a tough year for real estate last year because we're a transaction industry, and you need inventory, right? Um, Not just for that, but so one of the things that we were looking at was the More Homes on the Market Act from last year, which capital gains. You got a lot of people. I think Jordan Levine, your chief even mentioned that like 2.7 million homes have already passed that threshold of capital gains, right? Where they can't really sell the home without getting penalized with that tax, and that was done 30 years ago, the capital gains without any thought of indexing for
Right.
inflation and things, right? And so that's kind of a major part maybe of it, as well as the California Dream for All program, right? Great down payment assistance. And I know those two things are kind of in your wheelhouse. CAR strong support on those
Sure.
things. I'll let you kind of maybe expand on those
Yeah.
two.
Yeah, I would love to. And first, let me say thank you for getting the government affairs directors together from your counties because, one thing we've discovered, I am trying to be the best partner we can with those local associations and local government affairs directors because what we see happening is one really bad idea passes in a local jurisdiction at a city council or a county commission, and then it spreads like wildfire everywhere else. So if we can work closely with those local government affairs directors and give them additional resources to help fight those issues, it helps all of us. So kudos to you for getting them together and hearing what they have to say because they are an incredible resource for us. And because I am coming from that background, I speak their language, and we really have a great connection. But interesting that you mention More Homes on the Market Act because that is federal legislation introduced in Congress, and California Congressman Panetta is the one of the co-sponsors of the legislation. He's made a concerted effort to make sure that it's bipartisan legislation in Congress. So every time they find a Democrat to sign on, they get a Republican to sign on so that it stays 50-50 bipartisan. But Congressman Panetta, of course, from California, in fact, our leadership team just met with him about 2 weeks ago to talk to him a little more about this. And we're headed to Washington, D.C. next week to meet with every member of the California congressional delegation on this issue. And as you were saying, it never kept up with inflation. It was never indexed. So the goal here is to raise the $250,000 capital gains exclusion to $500,000 for the single filer and raise the $500,000 capital gains exclusion for the joint filers to $1 million. And whether it's this legislation or anything else we do, the goal is to get people off the fence. You mentioned we have no inventory. There is no inventory anywhere. People are stuck in their homes. We need to give them incentive to move. So if we can do that through this federal legislation, or if we can get creative at the local level, if we can do things that incentivize investors to maybe sell that second or third home,
Right.
so that a new family can buy that house. Those are important things for us to be focused on. So we are very excited about the More Homes on the Market Act, and that's just one of the many things at the federal level that we're working on. But you mentioned down payment assistance and the Dream for All program. That proved to be incredibly successful because it ran out of money almost instantly, and that's a sign that people knew there was a program out there to help those. You and I know there are so many single couples, families that are paying a lot more in rent than they would pay in a mortgage, but they can't get over the down payment hurdle. So anything we can do to help with that. So the state this was a really bipartisan effort in the California legislature. We're very proud of the millions and millions that have gone into this program, and we continue to fight for that. Let me also mention that the state association, California Association of Realtors, created our own down payment assistance program. We're working in every county in the state of California to get down payment grants to those in need, especially those in underserved communities. At our state conference, our winter business meeting just, very recently in Monterey, we approved another $1 million out of our state budget to go towards this down payment assistance program just to keep it going. Because anytime we can help someone get in that first home, they're going to build generational wealth, and they're going to, the benefits of home ownership are well documented. You vote more, your kids stay in school longer, they study better, they get better grades, all of these things that are good for our communities. So
Yeah, I agree completely. I would love to see it pass. I think, there's so many homes that people just can't sell because of the capital gains. They just can't take that hit. And you're right. There's a lot of people out there who could afford the payments for the house. They just can't afford that down payment, right?
right.
To get into the house. And for affordable housing and the lack of inventory and the homeless situation we have here, I mean, it can't just be new construction, right? I mean, new construction is a part of what we need. And one of the interesting things, John, I was kind of surprised a little bit is everyone seemed to be an overall consensus that we need more homes, new construction, but every time it would come with a caveat of just not in my backyard kind of a thing.
It's so frustrating.
Isn't that frustrating for you guys?
We all know we need more housing, and it would, it's a shame that teachers can't live in the same neighborhood where they teach the students, firefighters, first responders, police officers. We would love for them to be able to live in the communities that they serve, yet there's always pushback to building more. And, people love that they got in, right, but they don't want more traffic. They don't want more this. They don't, but it would help everyone. And, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? If we can create more, one thing you may have heard me talk about in the past, because you mentioned something about a local association where you saw me, what a lot of the general public and even realtors don't often understand is the economic impact of every single home sale.
Right.
Because a single home sale has this economic ripple effect through its economy, that local economy, the city that it's in, of an additional like $250,000 because you built the house, but then you've employed workers to do the work. Maybe you're just selling a house that's already built, but they need new carpet and they didn't have a lawn before. So now they need a lawnmower and, they need new drapes and appliances. And the person they bought those from now have money from the sale to go buy a new vehicle that they've had their eye on. And that ripple effect continues throughout the economy. It's so huge, yet we're shutting it down by not allowing construction.
Right. And, I mean, I think GDP for the nation is 16, 17% of it comes from real estate, right?
It is. Yeah. Real estate makes up somewhere between 15 and 17% of the GDP of every jurisdiction.
So it's a symbiosis. You need a healthy real estate, healthy market, right? And like you said, that ripple effect. So obviously it's why you're here to solve these issues, right?
It's a big job. But to close the loop on that, let me just say, a lot of people who say, well, we don't need more housing, but they want more school funding, they want more road funding, they want more of other things. Well, it's the real estate sales that are going to allow that to come, because it's the revenue created by the local jurisdictions for those sales that allow more money to go to schools and more money to go to infrastructure and all those kinds of things. So if you're complaining that you didn't get a new bridge or your roads have potholes, think a little bigger and think about the role real estate plays in that.
Exactly. So John, let's pivot a little bit to, it's 2024, like I said, election year, we all know, it's going to be a challenging legislative environment. What's kind of the hot button issues for realtors to keep an eye on that you guys are keeping an eye on, I guess, for 2024 as we proceed in this year here?
I would say the big things in the state legislature are property insurance, wildfire insurance, property insurance generally, but very specifically wildfire insurance. The leadership team and I have met with both the Fair Plan leadership and the insurance commissioner just in the past couple of weeks to talk about the concerns that we have. We are being told that they're working on all of these things day and night. The governor has actually made a proclamation that the insurance commissioner has to solve these problems. And so I've asked that the insurance commissioner update us as you move along and not wait until the end, till 2015 to tell us how it's going, to
Yeah.
give us incremental updates about how it's going, because that's incredibly important. But
It,
we hate to see that there are real estate sales not happening because of property insurance or
yeah.
wildfire insurance.
Oh, but we lost, I think, maybe not lost, but I think the state's top 12 insurers have paused or restricted new business since 2022. So it is a huge issue. The commissioner Ricardo Laura, I think Sierra has been positive in his plan, but like you said, because one of the things I've heard is just that a lot of the reforms and Governor Newsom has mandated like the fair plan get adjusted and so forth. But a lot of these implemented won't come until maybe 2026. Does that sound accurate to you?
I think everything that we want may not be here by then. But again, he knows there will be incremental changes along the way. There are a couple of bigger things, David, that are sort of outside the control of California's insurance commissioner, Florida's insurance commissioner, and others.
Sure.
And a big one of those is reinsurance. Reinsurance is coming from Bermuda, London, Lloyd's of London. These companies, we've heard about them for years, but there have been major catastrophes all over the world, whether it's earthquakes and volcanoes and windstorms and whatever, that have impacted the global reinsurance market. Yeah. So our insurers who are participating in Florida, in California and Texas and every state, they have to buy reinsurance. So just like you need insurance, insurance companies need insurance. So when they buy that reinsurance, it's incredibly expensive. And so some of the reforms are allowing them to pass along some of those costs, which they're not currently allowed to do. Some of the reforms relate to them being able to use forward-looking models for weather versus only rely on what's happened in the past. And so those kinds of things can be implemented as we go along and should start to free up more capacity for property insurance.
Fantastic. Yeah, hopefully they keep you guys involved in that, as it goes along. And it's a major thing.
Well, whether they keep us involved or not, we're putting ourselves we are forcing ourselves into the conversation because it can't really happen without us. And so we are there. We have staff in Sacramento who deal with the Office of Insurance Regulation on a daily basis. So
gotcha. Awesome.
So that's big. Obviously, other housing issues in the legislature, funding for down payment assistance and things like that are big. But, outside of the legislature, I have been telling realtors, think about the light at the end of the tunnel that is 2024, because 2023, you mentioned, was a tough year. Lowest home sales in, I think it's 16 years. There had not been less home sales in a really long time. But our economists and other economists are predicting a 25% or so increase in home sales in 2024, which means a lot of activity, and that's light at the end of the tunnel for many, many of our members.
Well, we'll look forward to, that's not something that's going to go away. So we'll look forward to talking again with you on that, regarding insurance and some of these things in the future, John. But, it kind of goes into, leads me into legislative day, the importance of it.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Coming up in May. I always wanted to, do you guys get together in terms of how do you formulate your message to keep it focused when you go in? Is there a set core of like, we're going to focus on these three things and keep the messaging, tight? Or is it kind of like...
No, it's a good question. And that's something I've been dealing with for 30 years, because we would do the same thing in Washington when realtors would come to Washington for those May meetings each year, and we send them to the Capitol. Realtors have hundreds of issues that they care about, but you have to focus on the ones that you can make the greatest impact during that time that you're there. So think about a legislative session, and there are committee meetings on certain issues. And if realtors all happen to be in Sacramento on, let's say, April 28th, just picking a day out of the sky, we want them to be talking about the issues that they can make the most impact on that week. So there could be hearings on down payment assistance. There could be hearings on property insurance reforms and things like that. Obviously, we stick to major real estate issues, but we try to keep those to maybe three or so issues that all members are singing from the same songbook and making the biggest impact on that one day or 2 days because every legislator is hearing the same message.
Right, right. And it could be a powerful influence. The one thing we were trying to really hammer home for realtors is that you can make a difference, right?
It
By
really
getting
is.
engaged.
And I tell you, as I travel the state, one thing that I hear from realtors is a lot of them attended their first CAR meeting in Sacramento, and it was legislative day. And that's when they got bitten by the bug because they saw the impact that an individual realtor can make when they're part of this larger group. And so we started something last year where I said, we're big enough. Let's close down a city block in Sacramento and let's have a block party and let's invite the legislators and the governor to come to this block party and see what other association in California is big enough to shut down a city block.
Right.
So we had thousands of realtors in a city block. We invited the real estate commissioner and, you know, members of the legislature, and they're mingling with our members, talking about issues in a more casual atmosphere. And we had so many realtors who were there for the first time thinking, oh my gosh, I'm part of this. This is incredible. Right. And so we had planned to only do it last year, but we're doing it again this year. So if you're listening, come to Sacramento for the April Business Conference and Legislative Day, and I guarantee you an incredible experience.
Awesome. Awesome. You know, John, I got to ask one thing about the state's got a $68 billion budget deficit, right? So, you know, we're in the hole. It's going to make things challenging in terms of, you know, funding. Do you worry, or does that change how you go about it? Or do you worry about maybe some of the things on the agenda just don't have, you know, things like, you know, what we talked about earlier with the assistance, the payment assistance, that those things get left out because there's just not enough money in the hopper?
You know, it is obviously a crazy situation to go from a multi-billion-dollar budget surplus to now a budget deficit. I think the issues with that will be more outside of our area. You know, we are continuing to make the case on down payment assistance. It's very bipartisan and people get that. But there are so many other issues that the legislators pick as their pet issues that they want funded. And so they can't do that in an environment where there's a budget deficit. You know, they can't just spend so freely. So they have to be much more conscious, and it makes them think harder and maybe work on things that are a little more bipartisan and have broad support. And I tell you, David, going back to my days in Washington, D.C., I've always said I could sleep very well at night with the issues that we are lobbying on, because they impact such a broad sector of the state and of the nation. There are these white hat issues like down payment assistance and getting people into their first home. The place where we probably need to be the most concerned is that when there's a deficit, there may be more eagerness to raise taxes and find ways to increase revenues for the state's coffers. So we have to be vigilant to beat back efforts that are unnecessary.
Right. And it takes being engaged. And, you know, one of our G80s, I can't remember which one said it, but he said, you know, is if real estate is your, I think, profession, politics is your business. And I really like that.
Yes.
I thought that was a fantastic kind of tagline.
It is true. And for our members who are listening, you know, just knowing that we have a staff in Sacramento that are reading through these thousands of bills that are introduced in one legislative session in the Assembly and the Senate, and looking for any angle related to real estate, because, you know, sometimes a bill can be introduced and it looks sort of just fine, but it could easily be amended into something completely different. And so we have to be conscious of that and constantly vigilant in looking at real estate provisions in any legislation that's moving.
Right. So, John, this has been fantastic. I'm going to just kind of wrap up with a couple of questions here for you.
Great.
And you know, first, it's kind of maybe on the technology side and the future of real estate here. So, first off, you know, one thing we've been doing, you know, is taking a look at. Obviously, we're in Silicon Valley, and artificial intelligence is in every newspaper and every article you read. And real estate doesn't exist in a vacuum, so I'm sure it's going to affect our. Do you have any kind of idea what you think, how the impact of like technology, AI could be on the real estate industry, on realtors business, and maybe any way that Sierra can leverage that and going into the future?
Sure. We have staff who are constantly looking at the evolution of this, and we've had a number of sessions on it. And I see other organizations are constantly doing sessions on artificial intelligence, and I encourage members to, follow the latest and greatest because it's changing at light speed. But everything from just practically how we operate as an association, and members tell me all the time, I can't find anything on your website. Would you fix the search feature? We now have a new artificial intelligence feature for our search that's being implemented to make it much simpler to find the things that you're looking for. So that's very practical. But then I hear of realtors all the time that use AI in their listing presentations, coming up with words and phrases and things. And I find that it gets better and better and better all the time. Of course, they have to look out for fair housing violations and things that a computer might not pick up on, but it's fascinating. And I love watching the evolution of it.
It is a fascinating topic, and I know we have a lot of vendors who are coming out with different kind of tools to use it for social media and so forth. And I've always just approached it as if it can help out, maybe take away some of the at least the mundane tasks, administrative tasks, and let realtors focus on what they do best, is build relationships and put people in homes. Then fantastic. But let's wrap up with. We'd be remiss not to bring it up as we kind of wrap this up. But everyone who's in the industry knows the lawsuit's been going on. Commission against NAR and so forth. And there's a ton of copycat lawsuits at the state levels. But I guess what I'm asking is we don't have to go in too deep. But what message would you want to convey to realtors who are maybe concerned about its potential impact on their business and real estate, in general going forward?
Sure. Yeah. And, I'm glad you asked because it is sort of the elephant in the room that everyone's wondering about. And, as you and I pointed out in the very beginning, I came to California from Missouri. So I was served in the first case that everyone's heard about in Missouri that has sent ripple effects through all of our news feeds since October 31st when that verdict came down. But I've been familiar with that one since the beginning. What I would say is we have planned for this. We do a lot of scenario planning like many of our individual members do and MLSs and local associations do. We were doing scenario planning long before the verdict came out. We hired outside counsel that we feel very, very good about. As of today, we're up to 4 seller class action cases here in California. And we expect all of these to be combined at some point. But, our antitrust defense counsel is so experienced in this area. And, we don't believe that, our members need to be laying awake every night worrying about this. What we do believe is that it would be really great if they use the buyer agency agreement. I hear from brokers all across the state who have been using buyer agency agreements for 10 plus years, and it's no big deal to them. I should probably tell you, because it's sort of breaking news, that the week before last in Monterey, the board of directors of CAR voted that we would pursue buyer agency legislation in the California legislature this session, meaning that state law would potentially make it mandatory that you have a buyer agency agreement, because national attorneys and others say that buyer agency agreement makes all the difference. If you have a buyer agency agreement with your buyer, the chances of you getting sued or being sued successfully are very slim. And so take that advice, use a buyer agency agreement, whether it's required by law or not. But I think everyone should start preparing that will potentially be the law of the land. And so why not get a head start on it and protect yourself? This will continue to unfold. I will not be surprised if there are additional lawsuits. I think from the very beginning, we've known that that's how copycats lawsuits work. Right. They saw something in one jurisdiction, and so they're throwing the spaghetti up against the wall to see what sticks. And but I just don't want our members to lose lots of sleep over it, because it's going to be a while before these things are worked out. And if they are using buyer agency agreements, I think they're going to be in really good shape.
That is well said, John. And I think we feel really lucky to have you here and your leadership at CAR. And again, I want to thank you for coming on here. And I look forward to seeing you in Sacramento in a few months.
I can't wait. We will have a little fun at the block party. How about that?
Oh yeah, we'll definitely. And you got to promise me to come back later in the year after that. We'll talk some more about insurance. And I know our CEO and President Dave Wetzel would love to get in on this conversation as well. So
I would love that. Definitely. Fantastic. I look forward to coming back.
Great. John Sebree, California Association of Realtors. John, have a great day, and thanks so much again.
Thank you.